Speak, it's 114, 7 p.m. You sent the text 4 minutes ago. 4 minutes, you've read it back 7 times. You've reread your own message like it's a legal document. Checking for typos, checking for tone, checking for anything that could be misread. The phone is face up on the blanket, you're lying on your side staring at it, and your chest feels tight in a way you can't explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. Why haven't they answered? Yet did that last message sound weird? Are they annoyed with me? Did I say too much? Did I say too little? Am I overreacting right now? Am I always like this? Wait, read that last thought again. You don't overthink texts because you're insecure. You overthink texts because somewhere along the way your body learned that silence is dangerous. You're not broken. You're not too much. You're not the anxious one in every group chat who needs to relax. Every single person who has ever loved someone and felt the ground shift under a delayed reply has stood exactly where you're standing right now, phone in hand, heart doing math. It was never built to do. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what's happening in your nervous system in those 4 minutes of silence, and more importantly, you're going to know how to interrupt it before it hijacks your whole night. Let's get into it. Most people think overthinking texts is a communication problem. It's not, it's a safety problem. Wearing a phone-shaped disguise. Here's the real truth. Your nervous system doesn't read a text message the way your mind does. Your mind reads words. Your body reads absence, and absence to a nervous system that has ever been left ignored or blindsided before doesn't register as there, probably just busy. It registers as threat. This is why you can know logically that they're likely in a meeting or driving or just distracted and still feel your stomach drop like something is actually wrong. Your prefrontal cortex, the smart rational part of your brain, is doing the math correctly. But underneath it, an older, faster system is scanning for danger, and it doesn't care what's logical. It only cares what's familiar. If somewhere in your history, a parent who disappeared emotionally, a friendship that ended without explanation, a past partner who went quiet right before they left, silence was ever the first sign that something was about to be taken from you. Your body filed that away, not as a memory you can recall on command, as a reflex, and now every unanswered text pulls that same alarm, even with someone who has never once given you a real reason to doubt them. That's the part almost nobody explains. You're not overreacting to this person. You're reacting to every person who ever went quiet before them, and once you see this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere: in the pit of your stomach, during a slow reply, in the way you reread your own sent messages searching for a mistake, in the 3 drafts you write and delete before sending something as simple as, "Hey, here's where it actually starts." Here's the part no one talks about: the double text spiral. Most people think the urge to send a second message means they're impatient. It isn't impatience, it's your nervous system trying to manually force the reassurance your body isn't getting on its own. But here's what nobody explains: that second text almost never comes from wanting to say more. It comes from needing proof right now, that the connection is still there. You're not adding to the conversation. You're checking if the rope is still attached. Picture the disconnecting version: Shez staring at her phone thumb, hovering, and she types, "Haha, no worries." Then adds a second message, 30 seconds later. "Let me know when you're free though," sent before Hess even opened the first one. Now, picture the connecting version. She feels the same tug in her chest, notices it, sets the phone face down on the counter, and finishes making her coffee instead. Same feeling, different response. Something in her is quietly saying, if I send one more thing, maybe he'll finally feel okay. But the truth is, no message he could send, speak, that would fully answer the question her body is actually asking, which was never about the text at all. And when you catch yourself before that second message goes out, something starts to shift. You stop trying to manage someone else's response time and start learning to sit with your own discomfort instead of outsourcing it to their phone. That discomfort doesn't disappear on its own. Which brings us to the part where most people get it completely backwards. This is where it gets really interesting. The myth of just don't care. So much, most people and most well-meaning friends will tell you the fix for overthinking is to simply care less, detach, play it cool, stop being so invested. But here's what changes everything. Caring less isn't emotional regulation. It's emotional suppression. Wearing regulations, clothes, and suppression doesn't calm your nervous system. It just teaches you to perform calm on the outside, while the alarm keeps ringing underneath. Think about the difference. One version of you reads the delayed reply, feels the spike, and forces a mental script, whatever I don't even care, while your leg bounces under the desk, and you check the phone 4 more times in 10 minutes anyway. The other version of you reads the same delayed reply, feels the exact same spike, and instead thinks, this is my body reacting to silence, not to reality, and actually feels the tightness in your chest start to loosen because you named it, instead of burying it, not pretending you don't care. Not performing indifference, not white-knuckling through a fake calm, but actually acknowledging the fear, so it doesn't have to shout louder to be heard. That's the moment overthinking loses its grip, not when you stop caring, but when you stop fighting the caring and start understanding it. It hears the part that reframes almost every argument you've ever had about phones. This is the story-generating machine, and it runs faster than you think. Most people assume overthinking is just thinking a lot. It's actually your brain writing an entire narrative, a beginning, middle, and end off a single blank space where information should be. But here's what nobody explains in the space of silence. Your brain doesn't tolerate not knowing. It fills the gap with a story, and because your nervous system is on alert, it almost always fills that gap with the worst version available. Not they're in traffic, not their phone died, but they're pulling away, they're losing interest, they're realizing I am too much. Picture it. He glances at the read receipt, feels his jaw tighten, and by the time 45 minutes pass has already mentally rehearsed the breakup conversation, already pictured her telling her friends, yeah, it just fizzled out, already grieving, something that hasn't happened. Now, picture the same 45 minutes, but this time, he notices the story forming and asks himself one question. Is this a fact, or is this a fear talking? The read receipt is a fact. Everything after it was fear dressed up as prediction. Something in him quietly registers. I don't actually know anything right now, I just feel like I do, and that one sentence is the crack where the whole spiral starts to lose its power. The story your mind writes in silence is never neutral, it's always the story your fear is most afraid of hears. The part most couples never figure out, how overthinking on one side almost always meets a very specific response on the other, and it isn't the response either of you wants. Most people assume that if you just explain how anxious you feel, your partner will understand and reassure you every time. Sometimes they will, but often, especially over time, something else happens instead. Here's what nobody explains: the more urgently you need a reply, the more pressure your partner feels. And pressure to someone who values space and autonomy doesn't feel like closeness. It feels like a demand. So the very thing you're doing to feel safer, reaching, checking, needing an answer now, can accidentally push the person further into their own shell, which then confirms your original fear, which makes you reach harder. This is the anxious-avoidant cycle, and it isn't two incompatible people. It's two nervous systems protecting themselves in opposite directions. Picture the disconnecting version. She sends, "Are you mad at me?" for the 3rd time in an hour, and he stares at the screen feeling cornered, so he goes quiet even longer, not because Hess punishing her, but because he doesn't know how to answer a question that feels bigger than the moment. Now picture the connecting version. She feels the same urge rising in her chest, and instead sends one honest sentence. No pressure to respond. Fast. "I just wanted you to know I am thinking about you," and puts the phone down. He reads it an hour later and actually feels safe enough to respond warmly because nothing in it asked him to perform reassurance on command. She doesn't need me to fix this right now. Something in him settles. She just needs me to come back to her when I can. That's the difference between a demand and an opening. Not louder texts, not more frequent check-ins, not a paragraph explaining exactly how anxious you feel in the moment, but one honest, low-pressure sentence that tells the truth without asking someone to prove their love on your timeline. Here's where it gets even more personal: the habit of editing yourself into someone smaller before you hit send. Most people think they are just being careful with their words, but watch what's actually happening. The joke gets deleted because it might land wrong. The exclamation point gets removed because it might seem too eager. The honest sentence gets replaced with something vaguer, safer, more forgettable. Here's what nobody explains: every time you shrink a message to avoid a possible reaction, you're not protecting the relationship. You're quietly teaching yourself that the real you is too risky to send, and the version of you that keeps getting sent instead, careful, guarded, edited, is the versi on your speak partner starts falling for. Which means you never actually get to find out if they'd love the real one. Picture it. She writes, "I missed you today," like a weirdly specific amount, laughs at herself, then deletes it and sends hope your day's going well instead. Flat, safe, forgettable. Now, picture the version where she rereads her first draft, feels the fear of what if that's too much, and sends it anyway unedited. A little exposed completely herself, something in her whispers right before she hits send what if. This is the version of me that actually gets to be loved, and that thought alone is worth more than any perfectly worded message. And when you let yourself be sent, instead of your safest edit of yourself, the connection stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like two real people finally in the room together. This is the part that ties everything back together, the moment you stop asking your phone a question only your own body can answer. Most people believe the goal is to eliminate the anxious feeling entirely to get to a place where a delayed text simply doesn't register at all. That's not the goal, and chasing it will only make you feel like you're failing every time you feel something. Here's what nobody explains: the goal was never to stop feeling the spike. The goal is to stop believing everything the spike tells you, feeling the tightness in your chest when a reply is slow isn't a flaw, to fix its information about your history gently surfacing in the present. What matters is what you do in the 60 seconds right after you feel it. Picture the old pattern: phone lights up. Eventually message says, sorry, was in the shower. And instead of relief, there's almost a flicker of disappointment, because some part of you had already built a whole story that needed somewhere to go. Now picture the new pattern. The same message arrives, and this time, because you named the fear earlier instead of feeding it, you actually feel the relief land clean, simple, uncomplicated by everything you didn't say out loud to yourself for the last hour. Oh, something in you finally exhales. It really was nothing, and for the first time in a long time, you believe it, instead of just hoping it's true. The stories you tell yourself in someone's silence say more about your history than about them. And once you know the difference, you get your evenings back. It's 114:07 p.m. Again, same bed, same blanket, same phone, face up beside you. But this time, when 4 minutes pass without a reply, you notice the familiar tightness rise in your chest. And instead of drafting a second message or rereading your first one for the 10th time, you take one slow breath and let it be a feeling instead of a fact. This was never really about the texts. It was about a nervous system that learned somewhere along the way that silence meant danger, and is finally learning. It doesn't have to mean that anymore you're not becoming someone who stops caring. You're becoming someone who can care deeply without letting every gap in a conversation write the ending for you. The relationship you're afraid of losing in the silence is usually the same one that's still right there waiting for you to put the phone down and breathe. If you've ever wondered what it actually looks like to bring this same calm into an actual hard conversation, the kind where the stakes are real and not just imagined, that's the video I made right after this one. Whatever you're waiting to hear back from tonight, you're allowed to put the phone down for a minute. It'll still be there. And so probably will they.